I hope you're doing fantastic because I had a pretty nice day. Um, so this is video one of vanilla JavaScript course that I'll be creating for you. As we talked before, I believe it is very important to understand vanilla JavaScript, uh, especially the concept parts. I think because when you touch something like React JavaScript, um, there's layers of other codes under it that we will not understand, right, unless we look at the source code. But there's going to be a bunch of things, and but down on under the layers you're going to notice that there's going to be vanilla JavaScript. And if you understand vanilla JavaScript concepts, no matter what you change up here, whether it be Angular or Vue JavaScript, you're going to see the pattern. You're going to see the pattern and you're going to understand it. And because you understand why React, how React and Angular uses this vanilla JavaScript in their own ways, you're gonna just see through those things, and it's just gonna stick with you. And when it sticks with you, it gets more fun, and it's gonna be better for you. So let's talk about this. Let's talk. But before we talk about vanilla JavaScript, I think it is really important that we talk about DOM, document object model, which is just another file full of JavaScript objects. That is the O part, right? Document is the D, the file, and O is the JavaScript objects. Every single one of these are JavaScript objects. And what is JavaScript object? But JavaScript object is just this, right? Yes, you know. So just full of JavaScript objects, and model is a structure. Model is like a tree. Model is what kind of structure is it in? Notice how head is inside of HTML, body is inside of HTML, and HTML is inside of document. Title is inside of head. It's like there is parent to child to child to child. There's grandkids, and there's this hierarchy, right? And that is, we call that hierarchy a tree, and that is the structure, and that's the model, right? It is document object model, where it is a file full of JavaScript objects in a tree structure, hierarchy structure. And those are all available through document object. And ta-da, right? Document object inside of it. Like HTML, head, body, HTML, like just like that. But we will get into that a little bit later. Let's first talk about what browser does. One, on a like this, on a browser, which is just another program, we type google.com. When we type google.com, it turns into IP address. What is IP address? It's just an ID for computer. I like not number 7. If I gave number 7 to represent as an ID for my computer that I have right now, we could call that IP address. It's just a way to identify a computer, right? And so when you type google.com, your client, your browser program sends a request, and google.com gets translated into the IP address, which is machine's location or machine's ID. And then we go find that computer at a Google facility somewhere. And we find that Google computer, and then Google computer gets the request and then sends back HTML file. Now we talk about our point 1, static HTML file. Back in the days, there was only HTML file, just static HTML file. Have you ever been to an HTML page where it was just nothing but text? Unlike Facebook, where you leave a comment, you see the comment go up right away. When somebody leaves you a comment, you get a notification, or you submit a form, you get a thank you bubble. If you get you can interact with the website now. It's so much more fun. There's activities based on what you click, what you do, you get something back, you see visuals, there's interaction, and all those interactions are written in JavaScript, right? But before, it was just static HTML file. So they were like, okay, you know what? We need a way to create some kind of interactivity so that user could interact with our HTML page, which is what you see right now on a browser. When you land on google.com or something, there needed to be some kind of interactivity. And so we needed a language to write that interactivity, and that's JavaScript, right? And then when you write JavaScript, what does it look like? I mean, for jQuery, for example, if we do something like, if we find a button with an ID of button, and when that is clicked, we put some kind of function in which is going to describe what we want to do, and we could do something like say hello to the user, and then ask a question to the user. Like you could write all these code, but what is it at the end of the day? It's a context, which is button, and we're registering some kind of event. When the button gets clicked, do something. That's what JavaScript is. We're writing an interaction where when the user clicks a button, we want it to do something. We're writing interactivity so that user could interact with the HTML. But we have a problem. JavaScript cannot talk to HTML. But what? Well, right here, right? But what? This right here, button. We're getting a button from HTML file clearly, right? And then we're writing code on it. When it's clicked, do this, do that. But I just said JavaScript cannot talk to HTML file directly. So what is this button coming from? That button is coming from DOM. This another file, right? And there's a button. And well, let's change it. Let's change it to title. I don't know, like a tag right here. When anchor tag is clicked, say hello to the user, ask a question to the user. This is not being grabbed from HTML file. This is getting grabbed from a document object model file right here, A. And what is A? A is just JavaScript object. Like I said, everything in this document object model file is JavaScript object. It's not HTML file. So, going back, right here, number one, when the Google sends back HTML file, two, what does browser do with that HTML file? Browser creates a DOM off of that HTML file. And what browser does is reads all the HTML, all the contents inside of HTML file, which is what? Which is, for example, if we're writing this, right? If we're writing this, the Google probably responded with an HTML, there's a head, and there is a title, right? And then the title says, my title. I'm literally recreating this DOM as an HTML. And then there is body tag, as you could see inside of HTML. And there is h1 tag with the text A heading, right? So h1 is A heading. And then there's a sibling called anchor. There's an anchor tag. And then there's text called link text. That's it. So HTML file Google.com responded with this HTML file, call it index.html, and then browser created a DOM file, and what you see is right here. This is what you see, right? Inside of HTML, there's head called with the title, my title. In HTML, title, my title. So basically, we could conclude that once we get an HTML file, once a browser gets HTML file from Google.com or whatever website you reached out to, it creates its own version of HTML file, and then it calls it DOM. And it does it because JavaScript cannot talk to HTML. And if JavaScript cannot talk to HTML, then the codes that we wrote to interact with the user, when user clicks something and something happens, cannot be ran. But JavaScript could talk to DOM because DOM is created with JavaScript objects. All of these head, title, h1, anchor tags, all of these become JavaScript objects at the end of the day. So that is why JavaScript could talk to this file DOM instead of HTML file. So we basically just get HTML file to create a DOM. And so browser creates DOM off of the HTML file, and then it reads all the content inside of the HTML file, and then creates JavaScript objects corresponding to those HTML tags, and we can call these JavaScript objects nodes, right? Let's call them node. Every single one of them is JavaScript object corresponding to some HTML tag, right? And it's a mirror of it. It's a JavaScript object version of it. We'll call it node. Head node, title node, h1 node, anchor node. And then what does browser do? Browser structures all of these created nodes, JavaScript objects, into a structure into a tree structure or hierarchy structure. Because if you look at it right here, and we're talking about the M for the DOM, right? Model means structure. And so if you look at HTML file, title is inside of head is inside of HTML. Anchor and h1 is inside of body is inside of HTML. This is an encapsulation structure where one thing is inside of another, and all those are inside of another. And this is encapsulation structure, which is also a hierarchy structure, right? Because if h1 and a tag is inside of body, we could say these are the children of a parent body, and then body is also a child of HTML, and this parent of body is also a child itself. it is a root element, but it's inside of document. So this is encapsulation structure, or how design this structure, and it did it in an encapsulation way, which we could also say this is a hierarchy. And if it's a hierarchy, let's just call it a tree. So it's a tree model. All the JavaScript objects called nodes corresponding to the HTML file tags. All the HTML content is converted to JavaScript object called nodes, and they're all structured in this tree. And there you have it. And then now that we have a DOM, browser runs JavaScript codes, right? And then now the code we wrote before, like for example, like a tag, anchor tag, when it's clicked, do something right here. This is jQuery, right? This is JavaScript. Browser runs JavaScript codes. Now that we have a DOM object called, now that we have an object, a node called A inside of this document object model file, we could go ahead and grab that and then register an event called click, and then when it's clicked, do something, right? So that also might ask you, well, if we're registering all these events to not HTML file tags, but really document object model objects, then are we displaying DOM ultimately in the browser or the HTML file? Once HTML file is grabbed, browser creates DOM, and once browser creates DOM, browser paints the web page based off of DOM. Okay, so we're ultimately painting the DOM. So let's say when anchor gets clicked, delete maybe let's say like a navigation bar, and then show spinning, show a spinner, you know, that thing that loads, right? And once that happens, then right now it makes sense because the browser paints the web page based off of DOM, and we're writing JavaScript to manipulate the DOM, right? So whenever we manipulate the DOM, the browser changes. The visuals of what you see on a browser on this web page changes because we're actually just displaying the DOM, and our JavaScript code based on users' interaction changes the DOM tree. And when the DOM tree is painted in the browser, and so when the DOM changes, then the visual changes. So the HTML file is literally grabbed from the browser to create DOM, and with this DOM, we could run JavaScript. JavaScript could interact with it, and so now we also display. We paint the browser off of this DOM, and so there you have it. So why do we need DOM? Why do we need to create document object model when HTML file is a retrieved from your website? The answer is because in order for user to interact with our website, those instructions are written in JavaScript, and JavaScript cannot talk to HTML file. So browser creates its own version of HTML file called DOM, and through the DOM, JavaScript, your code that interacts with the user, could be ran. So DOM allows JavaScript or our website to interact with the user. Because when user clicks a button, the JavaScript code talks to the DOM, gets that button, and then it interacts with it. So because right here, your instructions written in JavaScript is based off of anchor tag retrieved from the DOM. This right here is gotten from the DOM, not HTML. So for us to write code to interact with users, we need DOM because we need context. We need a context to write all these event instructions, and this context is grabbed from the DOM based off of HTML file, and this is all done by the browser. And so let's talk about this document up here, right? So browser creates this DOM file and puts all these JavaScript object correspond, which is its own version of HTML file content, puts it inside of document object. What is the JavaScript object? JavaScript object is at the end of the day like this. JavaScript object is just hash, right? And through this document, it's an interface between us and DOM. Document is an interface. Document object, which is just an JavaScript object, is an interface between us and DOM. And DOM is a representation of HTML, right? Because it's created off of HTML. So for us to talk to the DOM, for us to interact with the DOM, we need something. Browser needs to give us something to talk to the DOM. Like, what if I want this is the DOM that browser created. I want to grab this anchor tag, right? Well, it puts all this document object model structure, JavaScript objects inside of document interface, which is document object. And through document object, we could do get element by ID, or if this anchor has ID called a tag, then we could do document get element by ID a tag, right? And through that, we could get the a tag, the JavaScript object that represents anchor tag, through the document interface. And so when the browser retrieves the HTML file and it creates a DOM, it puts the DOM inside of a document object. And then on a console like this, we could get the document object. Inside of document object, it gives us the HTML file. This is all, it's shown to you as HTML, right? But really, these are all DOM nodes. And it just gives you in a way you could read best. But you see how like doc type is right there. Through the document object, we could get doc type, and then document type. to the document interface, query selector, which allows you to select things by CSS, um, body SRP, body with the class SRP, because it makes sense, right? Because all these JavaScript objects right here are inside of document interface, and through document interface we could go grab them. Just like how if I want to talk to the DOM, all I need is a document. That's it. And so it is and then this is where we're gonna cut our video here. But as we go on the next video, we're gonna go deeper into these objects, into these JavaScript objects called nodes. There's this title node, and there's text nodes, there's an attribute node, there is element nodes. We're gonna go look into more of all these objects that lives inside of document object model, and we're gonna dive deeper, but this was the higher scope concept of what DOM is and why it is important and why do we need it. DOM allows us to interact with the users ultimately. And okay, so if you have any questions, which I'm sure you do, if just please ask me those questions, and we'll talk about it more in detail. And yeah, see you soon.